All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your day to show up with us, to hear a little bit about kind of what we've been up to hear a little bit about Amazon, which if you know me, I love talking about Amazon. I caught the fever about 3 years ago. 5 years ago is kind of when I first heard about it. My neighbor who lives behind me was selling books at the time, and she was trying to get me started to sell on Amazon. I kept pushing her away, thinking that it was like a multi-level marketing scheme. Finally, I started to look into what she was talking about, and doggone it, she was right. I wish now I would have started, like 4 years earlier when she was telling me about it, because I think I would be that much further ahead. But I didn't, so I am where I am. But what's interesting is I've been selling on Amazon full-time right now for 2 years. And so the question that I have for you guys in the chat room is, when's the last time that you stepped out of your comfort zone? For me, my last really big jump right out of my comfort zone was when I went full-time as an Amazon seller about 2 years ago. Prior to that, I worked at the same organization for 15 years. My wife and I actually worked together. So for 15 years, we did this job together. We loved it. We really thought we were going to retire from the organization. Our pay was really good. The benefits were fantastic. We loved what we did, right? And after doing it for 15 years, we'd become pretty good at it. And so it's all similar to like a teacher at a school. And so that's, we just thought that's what we were going to do. But then the Amazon bug caught me, right? And I got the fever for Amazon, started doing it again just as a hobby. And then we came to a point where I either had to scale the business up because it was growing so fast, or we had to decide if we were going to transition out of the job that we had done for 15 years. And so it was a little bit of a scary moment for me, because you can imagine, if those of you in the chat room, if you worked for an organization for 15 years, you loved what you did, there was no issues or problems with the organization. But for some reason, we kind of felt like it was like the right time to transition out. So we kind of took the plunge, and I jumped out of what I would call my comfort zone. After doing something and living in the same place for 15 years, it's a little bit of a jump there. But what I've noticed is every time that I've done that, every time I've jumped out of my comfort zone, it's always a tremendous growth opportunity for me. Yes, Michael says Geronimo. That's kind of like what it was. My kids were balling. They didn't want to leave, where we were, the job that we were doing. But we kind of just felt like it was time. So yeah, right. We said Geronimo and we jumped, and I was thinking, as I thought back on my life, it definitely seems like the times that I have jumped right out of my comfort zone have been the times of the greatest growth and learning, right, that have taken place in my life. So I don't know if that's the same thing in your life. Right after I graduated high school, the next day I jumped on a plane. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and I flew to Philadelphia, and I actually lived in the basement of a 150-year-old church right in the inner city, is right across from Huntington Park, if any of you are familiar with Philadelphia at all. And basically we ran a day camp every day for kids that lived like in a 4-block radius. So me and about 20 other college volunteers. Now, I had just graduated from high school. All the other folks were in college. But we lived right there in the basement of this dusty, dirty old church. And then during the week, we would run a day camp for 200 kids. And all we did was pass out flyers, right, in a 4-block radius. And we would have to turn away kids from the day camp. But for me, that was something out of my comfort zone. But it was definitely the best summer that I ever had and the most learning that I ever had. I went to Philadelphia, right, to give. And I thought I was going to help people out, but I was the one that actually ended up being helped out. So it was, again, out of a comfort zone experience for me that provided tremendous amount of growth. So I know you're probably in the chat room going, Andy, what are you talking about, right? What does all this comfort zone have to do with selling on Amazon? Well, I'm going to get to that right now, because here's the thing. Jeff Bezos, right? He started Amazon out of his garage. He left corporate America and to start this little business, right? He had this vision of shipping products and of doing retail in a new way, right? That had to be an out of comfort zone experience for him. I'm sure as he was working out of his tiny little garage. And when we were on the tour yesterday, it showed a picture of his house and it showed a picture of his garage. He had to be kind of, thinking, man, am I crazy? Are people actually going to buy stuff like I'm thinking they will? Well, sure enough. So he starts out of his garage and he sells his first book. And I can imagine, again, it was kind of a scary time for him. But you know what? Again, he jumped out of his comfort zone. I just did an interview in our Slamazon Bros mastermind group with a seller who started selling on Amazon, and he was doing retail arbitrage. And you got to listen to this. When he first started doing it, he was riding the city bus in Chicago, going to stores, picking up product, right? He said sometimes he would have so much stuff when he would get out of the bus, he could only walk for 15 feet. He would have to set it down, rest, and then walk for another 15 feet in order to get it back to his apartment. And so it's just kind of mind blowing to me that he started something. For him, this was like something out of his comfort zone. He started doing it riding the city bus. I had never heard that before. And so kind of crazy. And now last year, this seller who I'm talking about, he did $1.8 million. He has a warehouse and he has employees, lives in Los Angeles, and he's only 27 years old. So, take that and put that in your head. He started riding the city bus in Chicago, and now a couple years later, he has a warehouse. He did $1.8 million in sales. He's only 27, and his business is continuing to grow. And so it's just kind of crazy to me. Back to Bezos, though. So he started in his garage, right? And now there's over 100 gigantic fulfillment centers all over the world. He started in his garage, and now there's 100 of these massive fulfillment centers all over the world. In fact, they shared with us in the tour, the first book that he sold out of his garage, the customer who bought that book, they named a building after that customer. And so now that customer has a building named after him on Amazon's main campus in Seattle. So I thought that was pretty creative, right, of Bezos doing that. So fascinating tour. I highly recommend, again, that you go if you get a chance. The building we went to, it's called the 7th generation Amazon fulfillment centers. So right now they're on 8th generation fulfillment centers. The building we went to was a 7th generation. I think they only have 3 or 4 8th generation buildings right now, and they don't give tours of that one. I'm not sure why. She did say that the 8th generations are a lot more robotic and a lot more automated, which was pretty fascinating because the one we went to yesterday was pretty high tech and was very automated. So the one we went to was a 7th generation. The total square footage of the warehouse we went to was 1 million square feet. I forget, she said, I think it could fit like 7 or 8 football fields or football stadiums. So it's just a massive place. If you've ever driven by an Amazon warehouse, they're just incredibly big, right? And so, when we went in, they're very strict, right, on the security. And so we couldn't bring our cell phones out. They didn't want us taking any pictures of anything on the inside. When the employees go through, they have to go through gates. It almost doesn't look like a prison, but the type of gate that they have to go through is really weird. They have to scan their ID, and I'm sure it's because they're trying to prevent employee theft. But that was the building. It was actually PHIL 7. So if you ship any of your product to PHIL 7, we may have seen it yesterday when we were walking through the aisles. And you better believe when I was going through, it was hard for me to watch where I was going because my head was always tilted looking at all the product and just in amazement of the variety of product, right, that was in that building. And again, the variety of product that Amazon sells. So when she first started the tour out, the big hullabaloo about the ASINs being restricted. Well, it's true. They're like, this warehouse was just overflowing with product. And some of the aisles that are supposed to be walking aisles, they had gaylords, right? Because there's so much product. And so it was funny when she first started out. Now, she didn't know that we were sellers, right? She didn't know we were third-party sellers. But as we were walking through, she was like, yeah, look out for this product. She said, this is actually product that Amazon has started restricting because we have so much of it in the various Amazon warehouses. And so it's funny because we've all talked about the ASINs, right, being restricted. And so, you know, as she brought us in, the first thing you see is you see the unloading docks. And there was probably about 100 semi unloading and loading docks, you know, what the truck backs up to. Obviously, that's the first step of the process. They bring everything out of the truck. They have these conveyor belts. Now, she didn't give us the exact mileage, but I'm guessing there were miles upon miles of these automatic conveyor belts that are just like whipping by. There was some, I'm not kidding, the conveyor belt must have been going probably 15 to 20 miles an hour, right? Carrying these boxes. And so these things are like zipping along. So, you know, they unload the boxes and then the workers, when they get the product out that you and I send, they spread it throughout the warehouse. And so if you've ever read anything about Amazon, this is how they do it. They want variety on their shelves. And so they're not going to put like all the electronics, you know, in one area, all of the health and beauty in another area. It's completely spread throughout the warehouse. And there's a method to that madness. The reason why they do that is when the pickers go, so when you and I order something from Amazon, then a picker has to go and grab that. They want, like, so if I send in, someone just said pie face in the chat room. If I send in 50 pie face, they want to spread that 50 pie face all throughout that warehouse so that picker doesn't have to walk very far to get to one. So, you know, when they put it in right on their scanner, it gives them the exact location of the closest pie face. So instead of having to go way over, if they were to do everything, you know, like organizationally wise, they maybe just have to go like 2 aisles over and they can pick one out. So it's kind of crazy because when you're looking at the shelves, you know, you'll see a DVD player right next to a health and beauty item, right next to a grocery item, and then, you know, just a total variety in their shelves. So it makes it actually easier too when the picker goes to that exact spot what he's supposed to see. If he's supposed to get like a Crystal Light, that's going to be the only Crystal Light in there. So it's, you know, makes it a lot easier for them to do that. So I thought that was kind of interesting how they do that. Again, if you've never watched anything, you can watch like on YouTube. There's different, different videos that people put out about why they do things certain ways. So, you know, the amazing things that kind of stuck out to me were the miles and miles of conveyor belts, the associates, right, who pack the product. I wish we could have got a video of it because it was crazy when these big bins come down to where the packers are standing at their packer station. And the packers all have like blow up bubbles, you know, that they put in the box. They have the actual the paper tape, right? And it gives out the exact amount based on the size. But these packers, they were probably doing a box about every 25 seconds is my guess. I mean, they're just moving tremendously fast, right? Just boom, 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 and then one after another. And so it's kind of cool seeing that productivity because I imagine, you know, they're just getting paid by an hour. Yeah, so Travis says he needs to hire some. I know all of us Amazon sellers were thinking the same thing. We were just looking at them and we were drooling like, man, we wish we could have some people like that packing for us. And so just super fast, right, packing. Sit it in there. They put it on the conveyor belt. That conveyor belt gets going. And then there's like, you know, probably, I don't know how many, 50 scanners then that are hitting that conveyor belt that are telling that box exactly where it's going. And then it ends up eventually pushing it into the truck. So, you know, that's just part of the tour. Again, I definitely recommend that if you've never been, you want to definitely go and check it out. And again, so when I was walking through, all I could think about was this entire operation, this 1 million square feet times 99, because now she shared with us yesterday, there's over 100 Amazon fulfillment centers located throughout the entire world, 100. All I could think about was this entire operation started right, out of a tiny garage. Started with an idea out of a tiny garage with this one guy who stepped out of his comfort zone and started shipping books. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard the story, but when he first started, Barnes and Noble, they laughed at him, and so did all the other big booksellers. They were like, no one's ever going to buy a book online. They want to come in the store. They want to feel it. They want to touch it. So they laughed him out of the room. He actually went to them to seek some capital. And now you can see what he's done to them. He's put them out of business. But it all, again, started out of his garage, which was kind of cool because they showed that story a part of the tour. Because, look, that's how a lot of you and I have started. And a lot of you and I are still at that spot. I still do packing and shipping out of my garage. But I still believe, right, that as I continue to grow, my operation is going to continue to get bigger. Eventually, I'm going to have to move everything out of my garage. I'm thankful for the prep and pack companies, right, that are able to do that for us. And so it's just a neat story, I think, and definitely a cool tour to go on. So, I guess my advice, my encouragement to you, right, is continue to step out of your comfort zone. I tell people this all the time. I didn't want a private label. When I was doing really good with retail arbitrage, with online arbitrage. I had a manufacturer I was ordering from in China. His product was selling like crazy. And then he told me that I could no longer sell his product. He said he would still sell it to me, but I had to put my own brand on it. And I actually didn't want to do that. I tried to talk him out of it. He was in Los Angeles at the time. I reached out to Jeff Howard, another seller, and I said, hey, Jeff, can you meet with this guy? And I paid Jeff a good sum of money. Jeff was out there like doing acting lessons. And so Jeff met with this guy. He was a Chinese guy, spoke very little English, but Jeff tried to talk him out of not allowing me to sell his product anymore. It didn't work. And so it was another time then I had to go out of my comfort zone because you know what? Up to that time, I had never created a listing. I had never did a listing. It was doing all RA, doing all OA, but I was kind of forced, right, to start private labeling. And I did, and I found out the process really isn't that hard. And I had it a lot more complicated in my head than it actually was. And so it forced me to do that. And then I loved it. I didn't have to shop anymore. I could just place orders, right, with vendors or with manufacturers in China, and I could send in 500 or 1,000 at a time. So again, it was kind of those times when I stepped out of my comfort zone. And so, you guys, I don't know where you're at, right, in your business, where you're at in your life, but when you're faced with those decisions, I encourage you to say, hey, look, is this an opportunity, right, that is going to give me a chance to grow? Is this an opportunity that's going to give me a chance, right, to really build something that maybe I wouldn't risk building? And so every time I've jumped out of my comfort zone, I've had tremendous growth in those areas. So look, I'm going to end this blab with a simple story. I told this story at the Scam Power conference. It's a story about a kid in my high school who unfortunately didn't have a lot of friends. His nickname was Butkus. All right. He was named after Dick Butkus. When I think about it now, and I shared this at the Scam Power conference, I actually have a lot of shame because I didn't reach out to him sooner than I did. So this kid Butkus, he had a lot of acne. He was a little slower. His IQ was probably borderline, to being mentally challenged. So he didn't have like a lot of friends. In fact, freshman year through junior year, when he would go to lunch, no one would sit with him. And so he would be at the table all by himself, 3 years straight. No one would sit with him. And right before my senior year, I had a real change of heart. It happened at my church. I really just became a different person. And I really, the senior year, when I stepped into that lunchroom and I saw Butkus there, I said, you know what? I'm going to step out of my comfort zone and I'm going to sit at Butkus's table. And I just want to become his friend, right? He didn't have any friends. And so, I sat with him and it was hard because when Butkus ate, he didn't close his mouth, right? And so his food would kind of go all over. And again, I shared earlier, his hygiene wasn't the best. And so there was a little bit of a stench there. But I just wanted to make a commitment, right, to really reach out to Buckus just to be his friend. And so that's what I did. And for lunchtime, I would sit with them and start to talk to him. And then eventually I invited him to the church that we went to, and I started picking him up and taking him to youth group. And the crazy thing about Buckus, and this is what I found out, was when I was sitting with him, he loved Superman. So Superman was his favorite hero. He was always talking about Superman. And in fact, underneath his clothes, he wore a Superman cape, right, and a Superman costume. So every day he lived with his grandmother. His grandma would allow him to put on this Superman costume. He would put on his clothes over it. But everything was always about Superman. And so I started taking him to youth group, right? And one thing Buckus always wanted to do at the end of the youth group meeting is he always wanted to pray. Now, if you go to church, most people at a Christian church, when they end their prayers, they'll say in the name of Jesus, right? Well, Buckus was a little different. He was a little special. My youth pastor was awesome. When Buckus would end his prayer, he would say, in the name of Superman, in the name of Superman. And everyone would say amen. And then what we would do with Buckus after we went to youth group every Sunday night, Buckus was he would have been great at retail arbitrage, because what Buckus loved to do after youth group, he wanted to go to Walmart. He lived with his grandmother. He never got out. He basically went to school, went right back home on the bus, never went anywhere. And so when we started to take him to Walmart, it's like his horizons were opened. And so every time, right, he would say, hey, on a Friday, we're going to youth group, right? And then we're going to Walmart, right? We're going to Walmart, right? Andy would ask me that like 50 times. I said, yeah, Buckus, we're going to Walmart. Well, we pull up in Walmart, and Buckus says the first time, he says, hey, Andy, can I take my shirt off? I just want to walk around Walmart with my Superman costume. And so every time then, when we would go to Walmart, he would take his shirt off and he would fly around Walmart with his Superman costume and his cape behind him. And everybody in that Walmart started to know Buckus. Every single person, when we would show up on Sunday night, the workers all knew Buckus by his first name. And it was like his whole life, his whole life had opened up. He was able to fly around Walmart, right, with his cape like his hero, Superman. And I shared this at the conference. When I look back, right, on my senior year, and I did a lot of great things, was successful on a number of sports teams, there is nothing that can compare to the success that I was able to have just by establishing and just loving on a kid that didn't have a lot of friends. And if you could take anything away from me that year, from my senior year, the thing I would beg you to never take away is the friendship that I was able to have with Buckus. And all it was me stepping out of my comfort zone, right? And just trying to love on a kid that became a good friend. And all I had to do was love on him a little bit. But that for me was a tremendous growth opportunity, a time that I stepped out of my comfort zone, just like the times I shared earlier. So I'm going to end the blab with that story. And you guys, I shared this at the Scam Power Conference. Look, if you're facing hurdles in your life, maybe you have obstacles that you got to get over. What I shared is, look, sometimes maybe you just need to put on a Superman cape or a Superwoman cape, right? And you need to just go into Walmart and fly around and remember Buckus. And then maybe your problems will become a little smaller. Your obstacles will become a little lower. All right. So that's the story about Buckus. You guys, thanks so much for hanging out with us today. I appreciate all of you so much. I love this Amazon seller community. I often say, and I talk with Travis about this, there's no community that I've been part of. And I've been part of like churches growing up my whole life. There's no community that I've been part of that has been so giving as the Amazon seller community that I've experienced in the last 3 years. And I hope if you're a new seller, a medium seller, or a veteran seller, that you're going to experience, or you have experienced, and you'll continue to experience the type of community that I've been blessed to be able to have. So thank you guys so much for hanging out. Have a great rest of your day. I guess today's Wednesday. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great day.